The other day, I was going through our son's closet and I stumbled across some old baby clothes and I started to gently fold them and put them away for probably the last time. And as I was thinking through that, I had this great analogy come to mind that that's exactly how I feel about this podcast, the Strong After Birth, Once Upon a Time, Her True Strength podcast coming to an end. And in the same way I'm putting something away, I also know what is now, what is ahead and yet to come. And so though while yes, putting away baby clothes kind of feels a little sad, maybe a little like tender and emotional, it's also so full of gratitude for the season that we shared here together. And so I wanted to end this conversation with a topic that matters deeply. And welcome back if you are joining us. This is the second bonus episode and the very last episode of Strong After Birth. And today we are talking about a topic I believe that is not covered widely enough, especially in Christian circles, and that is postpartum depression. I'm joined by Mary Reames Reinhardt, a nurse practitioner, the founder of Lucera Health. She specializes in perinatal mental health and brings not just expertise, but so much compassion that feels like a breath of fresh air. Because struggling with depression does not mean that you failed at your faith or failed at your motherhood, and that your worth does not crumble in the dark. One of the things that Mary said in our interview that I absolutely love is she talks about how God is not disappointed in us, that He is near to us. And that reminded me of Psalm 34, which says, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." And that is the kind of God that we are talking about today. So whether you are in the thick of postpartum, walking alongside someone who is, or just curious about how we as the church can love women better in this season, I pray this conversation feels like someone quietly turning on a lamp in a dim room. It's that gentle light that helps you to keep taking the next step forward and to help you know that you are not alone. So before we dive in, if you haven't head on over to YouTube yet to subscribe to the Strong After Birth YouTube channel, do that now. What are you waiting for? And then buckle up, grab a pen and paper, and listen to this awesome conversation with Mary Reames Reinhardt. Postpartum is hard. One second we feel like our bodies are miraculous, and the next we feel like we're a complete mess, out of touch with the strong, confident women we used to be, all while the fitness industry pressures us to bounce back as quickly as possible to a body that never looked like it was pregnant to begin with. That's why, whether we're 3 days postpartum or 3 years postpartum, we need the refreshing truth of gospel-focused fitness to give us energy for the physical challenges of motherhood, peace with our postpartum bodies, and kingdom-centered motivation to train for strength and stamina. So mama, whether you're sipping on cold coffee or folding 5-day-old laundry, I pray by listening every Monday, you become equipped, encouraged, and empowered for a strong motherhood, all for God's glory. This is the Strong After Birth podcast. Thanks for joining us. Mary, I am so glad to have you here. I just feel so blessed to be able to connect with you on such a cool aspect like a podcast to talk with women about postpartum depression, a topic I think that especially in Christian circles, which is the kind of the context that I want to carry this conversation on about. And just talk about postpartum depression, how it affects us, and what are some things we can do. But before we dive in, I've recently started asking moms, what are some of the best things about motherhood for you right now? And then what are some of the hardest things about motherhood right now for you? So if you would just quickly introduce yourself, share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then if you could share just a couple things with our audience, we'd like to just kind of kick it off with some authenticity, go deep real quick. But yeah, go ahead and share with us some of those things.
Well, kind of like you mentioned, my name's Mary Reames Reinhardt. I have 3 little boys, so 10, 8, and 5. And my husband and I have been married for 22 years. So I joke that we got married when we were 12 because that feels makes me feel a little old, 22 years. So also a nurse practitioner. I have a practice called Lucera Health. But in terms of being a mom in this season right now, I feel like we've entered kind of a new season. I think as a mom, sometimes you're like in those like toddler years for a long time, especially if you're having more babies and our family feels complete. So it dawned on me maybe like 6 months ago that all of a sudden we're able to sleep a little bit later than all those years when like somebody's always up crying or up at
How does
five
that
o'clock in the
feel?
morning. Our kids like can be a little bit self-sufficient in the morning. So that in and of itself of like a new phase of sleep
Hmm.
is like kind of amazing.
Mm,
Um, the hardest part now we've kind of moved into where they're all involved in their like activities. So it's a
mm,
little bit taxi service, a little bit.
mm,
And then the school years of like homework and all the social and academic complexities of that. So it's just a different, it's not worse or better. It's just, it really is a different season that it is now. So, but the ages that they are right now, they're really fun. Like you can see their personalities and,
mm,
them starting to sort of interact differently with each other and stuff.
mm.
So it's just like, and there's a sense that like this is going to go by really fast because my oldest is like 10. And, by the time they're like 15 and 16, their parents just have a different place in
Yeah.
their life. And like the sense that like time is going by fast. So we actually just had
Mm,
the conversation yesterday, the day before, of like, we need to like really enjoy the next few years because it's going to be gone before we know it.
mm.
So it's kind of where we are family
Yeah.
wise.
Somebody told me once you get 18 summers with your kids. And I
Totally.
was like,
Yeah.
don't put it that way. That's so sad. Like, it's, we've already had two, it like
I know.
it
I
it
know.
it does. It does. And it's
Yeah.
such a like you think about that. You talked about moving out of that stage of the toddler stage and now into this more like
Mhm.
developmental stage where you're having these
Yeah.
conversations and I guess you're probably doing a lot more like discipleship work rather than survival work,
Totally, exactly.
right?
And I didn't want to leave that unnoted, especially like with the, talking about summer, and I'm sure lots of your listeners are still in summer. Like with the littles, it is just a different type of energy too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it can be, and it's okay to name it as like some days can be a slog, when they're
Mm-hmm.
little, and the house is in total disarray like all the time. So I mean, to name the beauty of it and the days that are hard, that are like
Mm-hmm.
really work. And it just, it evolves and, it's still hard, obviously, some days now, but you're like the hard now, sometimes they're like bigger issues. It's like,
Mm.
relationships with friends at school or how
Yeah.
they treat each other and
Mm-hmm.
really speaking into like their character in a different way than you were when they're like 2 and 3. I mean, two
Yeah.
and three, you're just trying to keep the
Right.
wheels on,
Right. Right.
but really trying to mold, their heart towards themselves and
Mm.
towards other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that would have to take a lot of intentionality too, hearing that you've also picked up on busyness as well, like at the same
Totally.
time.
Yeah, speaking of like summer, last summer was such a busy summer for me because I was
Mm.
starting my practice and everything.
Right.
And so, and that hurt my heart a little bit last summer. It was what it was. You have
Yeah.
seasons that are just like busy,
Mm-hmm.
but didn't feel like I was as available last summer. And
Mm-hmm.
this summer, I tried to really, pace myself and slow down and feel like I was able to spend a lot of time with them this summer. So it was a
Mm-hmm.
nice contrast to last
Yeah.
summer. But that happens in life where it's just a really busy season.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's good to name it, I think, as a season where, like, I
Yeah,
mean, I think God gives us seasons to see summer, winter, fall, spring. We can see like examples
totally.
of that in nature, right? Like Earth is pretty busy in the summer. It's
Yeah,
doing a lot of
yeah,
growing, a lot of storms, a lot of sun, and then during the winter it does slow down. So I think that
yeah,
it gives us grace when we have that like little voice inside our head of like you're not doing enough to know like this is a
totally.
season. I'm not going to
Right.
develop into a yearly pattern.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. So,
that's good.
yeah.
That's cool. Well, thank you for sharing those things. It's cool to hear that of like, obviously we're in the thick of it right now of like
Yeah.
raising a toddler and we're very much so in the baby having stage. And, we
Yeah.
talk about discipleship with our kid and what that looks like. And we're going through, the attributes of God and the letters of the alphabet
Totally.
and all of those things. And it's fun, but I'm almost excited more so for that phase where you get to have those intentional conversations and
Yeah,
making space for that, which I think is fun. It's cool.
for sure. For sure.
Um, well, the topic for today is postpartum depression.
Yeah.
And I wanted to invite you on the show to talk about postpartum depression because I think it's not talked about enough, like I said, in Christian circles in particular. And if it is talked about, I feel like it's kind of just like whispered in the shadows.
Totally. Yeah, for sure.
so, so I'm curious, what what happens when the church doesn't talk about postpartum depression? What does the like silence or even the shushing or like maybe some layers of shame? What is not happening because we're not talking about it?
Yeah. You said the word shame, which that's exactly what came
Yeah.
to mind.
Yeah.
And even beyond postpartum depression, I think when, as Christians or the church, we're unable to talk about the really difficult things in life,
Mm-hmm.
then we're left to feel isolated and
Yeah.
feel shame, which is not of God, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. One thing that I think has pressed on me over the past couple of years is how, like, the relational nature of God. Like, we were just not meant to do life alone. Like, from
Yeah.
the beginning, God is a relational God, He's a triune God. So, um, I think as the church, well, one as a culture, I think for moms in the postpartum period, beyond the church, in our particular culture, we don't tend to do a great job in supporting mothers. Other cultures, moms are like almost in bed for like a couple of months with the support of extended family. And in our culture, for some people, we're lucky enough to have like grandparents and parents around. But lots of families live far away from siblings, parents, or they don't have a relationship with anymore. So you're kind of left, by yourself in some ways. So I think that's one thing that's kind of unique to our culture, even
Mm-hmm.
beyond the Christian culture. Within Christian culture, I think sometimes, and I do believe, like in comparison to when I was growing up, this is changing, but being able to name and talk about the hard and find support in that rather than like you're not doing enough or it's a moral failing or anything like that. So making space to ask for help. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of contrast like our ability to ask for help is do one, when we don't ask for help, is it because we feel like we're failing in our faith? Or is
Mm-hmm.
it our pride that says, I don't want anybody to see that I have weaknesses, which both of those I feel like, is not how God intends for us, to live. So in terms of that, I think, yeah, just normalizing just the mood changes in general that women
Mm-hmm.
experience in the postpartum period. There's so many neurobiologic changes that happen in the brain, and kind of, I joke with people, but I'm also serious. Like, our brain just gets really mushy in that period after having a baby. Like, it's not just our body goes through a big change, our brain does. So
Mm-hmm.
having a space to rest and not take back on not only our previous responsibilities, but the responsibilities for a new human being all at
Mm-hmm.
once. So, really just providing resources and letting women know, like, hey, you are not meant to like do all this by yourself. Um, I wish for every pregnant woman, and I'm sure you do too in your work, like I wish we all had like a consult with a really good perinatal provider. Obviously, we have our
Mm-hmm.
OBs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, just to prepare, help bring dad in, help kind of make a plan of how do we support mom? How do we make sure she's getting sleep, she's getting food, all those kind of things that she
Mm-hmm.
needs so that we kind of prepare and make a template that they can work through that makes sense. So I always think preparation is super helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely setting an expectation. Because I think that
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
about your experience, but half of what made postpartum hard for me was the shock factor of like, oh my gosh, I
mhm,
didn't
yeah,
know my body was going to change so much. I didn't know it was going
uh-huh,
to be so painful. Like I didn't,
right,
that just that like shock
right,
factor I think can add so
yeah,
much like hurt
yeah,
to harm. And then if you're
yeah,
I hear you talking about how, kind of our independent driven culture
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
creates this I have to, I'll do it alone type of
yeah,
mentality,
right, right, right.
which
We have somehow developed the message that doing it alone is better or means that we're
mm,
stronger or more
mhm,
resilient. And I don't think in reality that's what we experience in it, or that's, you know, true. We pick up a lot of messages, whether it's social media or, wherever, of what women in general, postpartum or not, should be. And I think it's incongruent with like the actual real lived experience of
yeah,
women in general.
yeah, yeah. Do you think, I know you mentioned it's becoming more popular to talk about it, to be screened for it. Do you like, what do you think are some of the effects of that silence, particularly on like the family unit? Like when mom is
Uh-huh.
struggling but not saying anything, how do you think that affects the family?
Yeah. Well, we know even from just not to get clinical, but the research that mom's mood and her experience really impacts babies' development in general and that
Mm,
mother-baby bond. That, and I say that not all of us have rough days as new
mhm,
moms and little babies, and your baby will be fine. But the more that the baby can interact with mom and other caregivers that are loving and responsive to their needs, I tell the moms that I work with, taking care of yourself is taking care of your baby. Like it
mhm,
100% is um, linked together. So being able to have moments where, even just like taking a real true like 2 hour nap where you can give baby to a trusted caregiver, whether it's dad, whether it's a parent, whether it's somebody, that you're paying for the help
mhm,
to take to relinquish some of that control and let them love on baby for a few hours to take care of yourself is the best thing you can do both for yourself and for baby.
mhm,
I do think mom carrying it on her own or having to carry it inside alone impacts everybody. And sometimes, again, because the brain is so like mushy, as I say, in that period, sometimes it's hard to name or verbalize what is needed in the moment.
oh
And I
yeah.
think sometimes partners or dad or parents who are involved um, don't know how to ask in a
Mhm,
way or like just do what needs to be done. So everybody's kind of left like not knowing what to do in a lot of ways, not knowing what to do maybe if there's other kids involved, like toddlers at home or older kids at home. So I think again I kind of go back to that preparation time of giving everybody, including dad, like space to ask for help. So,
mhm,
one thing that I do in my practice is when I'm seeing moms prior to delivery, is I'll connect with dad as well and make sure they both have my contact stuff and tell dad, like,
mhm,
hey, if you have a day where you're like, I don't know what's going on here, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to help, well, what? Shoot me a message and we'll like troubleshoot it. Or if you're starting to get overwhelmed,
mhm.
so really like supporting that whole unit, I think is important.
Yeah, that's good. It's so good because then that gets the dad on board and then he feels more empowered. And
Totally.
when
Yeah.
I think when men take on their role that God designed them to have as like provider, pastor, and protector, when they're sitting in that role well, I think women can receive better. And I think we can get to a place where we can like just
Yeah.
openly receive help and receive the things that
Yeah.
we need that we don't even sometimes know that we need.
Totally.
So
Totally. And it's like,
that's good.
the whole experience is new for mom, it's new for dad. Um, and so much of like knowing what to expect, like, she may be weepy a little bit. And that, we talk about the baby blues, which is a real
Mm-hmm.
thing. You got a lot of hormonal fluctuations, and that's okay. It's okay. I do from a safety standpoint, I often tell mom and dad, like, hey, if you find yourself suddenly overwhelmed, it's okay to put baby down in a safe place in their crib and cry a little bit. Like they are
Mm-hmm.
not going to die from crying. That is how they communicate, like something's bothering me, or how they just talk or exercise their brain. So
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to put baby down safely when you feel overwhelmed and take a minute. So I think there's so much like our emotions can get so escalated and
Mm-hmm.
being able to step back sometimes. So I think so much of the prep work is giving mom and dad and family permission, like, setting expectations, knowing what's typical, what's normal, um, giving them permission to focus on themselves as they also focus on baby too.
Yeah, that's good. Preparation is key. It's such like a catchphrase,
Yeah,
but it
totally.
really is.
Yep.
Preparation and expectation makes such a difference.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned this concept of like the mom mushy brain. I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you could guess why God did that, because like God designed every aspect of our being, right? And like even though we're broken, it is still within his design. But if you had to guess, like, why do you think God has that stage for the female body after delivering a baby?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the, I don't know, but
It's the answer, of
I
course. We
think,
all don't. No one
yeah,
can know
yeah,
his
totally.
ways. But if you
I
had to
know.
guess,
Yeah, totally. I think again that sort of sense of it makes us it's supposed to make us slow way down and
mm,
spend that time. I don't want to say in bed, we just don't do that, but I mean in ancient times they certainly did, but spend that time with baby and sort of that interdependency as
yeah,
a family unit and as human beings and with him, like we're just again, our culture is just so go, 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 do, do,
mm,
do.
yeah,
And I just, that's sort of like that Sabbath time of the
yeah,
brain really slowing down and
mm,
just being with baby, being with family. You know, God certainly didn't create us to be like, okay, I really, the things that we think of like, I got to get back in my body in shape. I mean, that's just crazy when you think about
mm,
what human beings, are, but those messages are very real. So
yeah,
I do think it is meant to be a slowdown for
mm,
everyone and to create like you have a baby that's fully dependent on you. You're not meant to do that alone.
mm,
You are meant to depend on others as
mm.
well. So I think there's a real relational aspect that it's meant to create that we, do a disservice to in a lot of ways.
Mm. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, it's like a built-in Sabbath
Yeah,
to
yeah,
a woman's
yeah,
life. But yeah, you're
exactly.
right. You could preach on this podcast all day about bounce back culture because it's something we talk a lot about and how it affects
Yeah,
our body image, how it affects our relationship with
right.
the Lord, our relationship with others. And so yeah,
Yeah,
that is a topic we talk about often
yeah,
because it is so infiltrating and I think probably a
yeah,
contributing factor to a lot of, postpartum
yeah,
depression
yeah,
effects on
yeah,
ourself when we how we
yeah,
see ourselves.
yeah,
But I like to pivot to just clearly defining the terms of postpartum depression because I think now that it is almost pop psychology, I'd like to
yeah,
hear a good, clear definition of what it actually is
totally. Yeah,
and what it actually is not. So,
yeah,
could you paint that picture for us? And you are more than welcome to use technical terms as long as you provide us some
sure.
good definitions.
You
We're
totally,
we're
yeah, yeah,
welcome to it.
yeah. I try not to use technical terms as much as I can in my practice. And even with like, we consider postpartum depression a
Mm,
diagnosis. So think,
right,
well,
right.
uh, diagnoses are just categories. And I
Mm,
wouldn't say they're arbitrary categories, but categories don't always speak to the individual. So I always tell folks in my practice, I want to know what areas that we individually need to support you are, regardless of the diagnostic
mm,
categories. Like diagnoses are there to be helpful, but you know, uh, the question really is how do we support you and your unique needs?
mm,
So, in terms of that postpartum period and mood changes and depression, like I said, the brain chemistry changes so much. We have like a sudden drop in estrogen and progesterone, and there's a hormone called allopregnanolone, which impacts sort of what we call the GABA receptors in the brain. Not to
mm,
get too technical, but they're kind of the calming factor. So all that to say, there's just a lot of shifts going
mm,
on in the brain.
mm,
So I would kind of define postpartum depression as we have expected mood changes in the early stages, but when we're noticing that as the months go on or weeks go on, or severity worsens of apathy, um, obviously all moms have decreased energy, but sense of guilt and shame,
mm,
you know, being able to name like I feel depressed, I am sad,
mm,
that seems to be persistent. Like I said, we all always say life comes in waves, and we want to be able to ride the waves rather than be crushed by them. So I often see people as they're telling their story where day in and day out they are being crushed by the waves. And the whole
mm,
point of kind of bringing in support is to give you some buoyancy. Not that every day is great or that
yeah.
you have this amazing sense of joy every day, but that you're able to reasonably move through your days, function, have moments of joy, have moments of sadness that come and go as we would expect. So kind of keeping it in that, um, sort of within normal limits range. But if we're noticing ourselves living under a cloud or constantly being crushed, I think
Mm.
that's when we start to ask the question like, hey, what support do I need? Is it talking to somebody? Is it talking to a professional? Is it figuring out a different way to organize my life so that I have a little more capacity? Um, what I would say postpartum depression is not, the biggest thing that I want to name, it's not a moral failing. It's not
That's good.
moms not loving their babies. It's
Mm.
not, wishing that you didn't expand your family or any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think, and it may be that some women, when they're being honest with themselves, are like, I am starting to have the feelings of like, do I love my baby? Whatever. Like all of that is okay. And we can support it and help mom to get to a place where she's thriving. So any of the thoughts that are going through moms, the guilt and the shame that comes with those, just dispelling those of like, it's okay if you're questioning sort of what have I done? Like
Mm-hmm.
that happens and we can support you. The most important thing is just to like have somebody to speak honestly with and name it and troubleshoot together.
Mm. Yeah, that's good. That's good. You're having like a team of people that you don't feel so
Yeah,
isolated by. That's good.
yeah,
I liked how
yeah,
you gave some specifics of that feeling like the wave is just crushing you, because that can
yeah,
feel like a day after day. Like the
yeah.
repetitive motion of waves is similar to the
Right,
repetitive
right.
uh
Yeah,
like trial of the days.
yeah,
If
yeah.
you were to take a picture of a mom struggling with postpartum depression who didn't
Mhm.
know it, what do you
Yeah,
think that would look like?
yeah, yeah. Um, one thing, one thing that I think is important to name in that, and so I am answering that,
Mm-hmm.
is one thing that I see that happens with moms, whether they are experiencing some degree of postpartum depression or not,
Mm-hmm.
is intrusive thoughts. So I wanted to name
Mm-hmm.
that because that's a really common experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can lend itself into whether it's postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety. Intrusive thoughts. So, for example, we all have those. We can be going down a road. It's just kind of how our brain works and lets us know of what's dangerous in our environment. Driving down the road, see a bridge, and be like, oh, that'd be weird if I drove off that bridge. But we just kind of let that thought go by, like, that was a weird thought, and we move on. We all have
Mm-hmm.
something like that to some degree sometimes that those type of thoughts are really common in the postpartum period. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Probably almost all moms will have thoughts that pass by of like intentional or unintentional harm towards their baby, or a lot of times those thoughts happen and then they cause up shame because it's like, oh my gosh, why did I think that? I would never do that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when we don't know, like, hey, that's a common experience for moms, it's okay. It's just your brain kind of working through this new thing that you care about. It doesn't mean that you want to harm your baby or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just naming that, I feel like sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one that
Yeah.
experienced it. No, 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 that's okay. Um, so just things like that happen in the postpartum period that are common.
Mm-hmm.
A mom who's kind of getting into that place of those thoughts kind of getting sticky, as I say, where those are swirling around. And then her level of shame and guilt is going up, and she doesn't know what's happening. So I think that can be one version of kind of mood changes with moms in the postpartum period of just this kind of constant sense of fear and worry about their baby's safety, about that hypervigilance. And we think of that more as like on the anxious side, but mood in general is like a spectrum. So it all kind of weaves together. On the depressive side, it often can just be like I use the word apathy a lot or
Mm-hmm.
indifference, which
Mm-hmm.
your energy stores are so low, but in general in the postpartum period, but feeling like you're not getting any breaks in it,
Mm-hmm.
it can just feel like you're kind of walking through a fog all
Mm-hmm.
the time. and maybe beyond the first month that you're getting into month 2 and 3, and there's just no reprieve from it.
Mm,
Oftentimes that can be really exacerbated by lack of sleep. And that's
mm,
one thing. I mean, sleep in general is the bedrock of our mental health. And in the postpartum period, it's so hard because sleep is so elusive with baby,
mhm,
but prioritizing that and create like setting up the family unit and so like support system in a way that mom can, I always want moms to work towards at least 5 to 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep.
mhm,
After those first couple of weeks. Um, so anyways, all that to say, it can look like a fog that just will not remit
mhm,
um, on the mild level. Of course, we have folks that, especially with prolonged lack of sleep, can get into a really severe
mhm,
space of having thoughts of harm to themselves or
mhm,
somebody else. The mind playing real tricks on you.
mhm.
And I always want to name, those more severe, I guess we could say, symptoms as well, because as we kind of let things go and not sort of notice them or pay attention, things can continue to move kind of in the wrong direction, and we want to, support that.
Mm. That's good. Yeah, that's really good. I
And
have
I
a,
think
this is
one
a,
thing I was going to say, I think it's
okay.
okay to not like when it's always okay to reach out if you don't know, like, is this normal? Like, do I need support around this? What does that look like? Always okay to ask and consult with somebody, and either be reassured in the sense of like, hey, how can we get you just like more naps, more support, all
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. Or yeah, let's like take this seriously and see what next steps might be.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's really good. I have a question. It's kind of just more of like a clarifying question. How would you differentiate between some type of like spiritual warfare? Because I also believe when like Christian families agree with the Lord that they want to influence a generation that they'll never see for the
Yeah.
kingdom. I also feel like there can be some spiritual warfare that can happen too,
Mhm.
especially in those early stages when moms can be so susceptible and like
Yeah.
are having a hard time getting in community and having a hard time getting in the word and
Yeah. Yeah.
getting the spiritual food and water that they need.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, how would you define the difference between the two of those? Where if someone is like, it could be a little bit of both. So maybe the water is just murky, but what are your thoughts on that as far as like spiritual warfare as it relates to postpartum depression? Do you think it
Yeah.
contributes? Do you think it's like a heavy factor, minimal factor? What have you seen
Yeah.
from your experience?
I mean, honestly, I feel like the sense of guilt and shame, like there's a spiritual component. I mean, if you look back at like the garden, one after, I mean, the initial lie is that, oh, the Lord doesn't care about you, or he's not
Mm-hmm.
telling you the truth. And then they
Mm-hmm.
run away in shame. So even those like threads of like the core of our brokenness, I think really
Mm-hmm.
is I mean, we can call it spiritual warfare or just like
Mm-hmm.
the spiritual brokenness of this world. So I think it
Yeah.
all, interweaves together. So I
Mm-hmm.
think those messages, especially when we layer on, um, like I said earlier, I think the time period is meant like we're meant to let God love on us,
Mm-hmm.
not us like up the ante on our performance. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
I think oftentimes mom can be like, I need to be in the word more. I need
Mm-hmm.
to listen to worship music more. Yes, and
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to just like sit in like, hey, I am loved. I am beautiful. Like God knows me and he is for me in a
Mm-hmm.
way that I can't possibly even imagine. So like that rest space rather than that striving space.
Yeah.
Because I think the enemy can often say like, oh, you should be doing more, or this is,
Mm-hmm.
you're not doing it right. This is a
Mm-hmm.
failing on your part.
Mm-hmm.
Chase after the Lord more. I would say, okay, and I am operating from a place of being, I don't have to do anything
Mm-hmm.
other than to trust that like I am loved in this moment and God has given me this baby or this season or whatever, and He is for me and He is with me. So I think,
Mm-hmm.
can I go back to kind of the rest of it and not letting the messages of do more. I'm like, do less,
Right,
you
right,
know,
right, right.
trust. And that is, I think, for our culture and for our Christian culture can
Mm-hmm.
be actually the harder side of the coin, you know, of
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
really believing,
Yeah.
oh, I'm like loved as I am rather
Mm-hmm.
than I'm loved for my performance.
Right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. That's good. And it's like shifting into that being mode rather than that doing mode, which doesn't require any time, right? Like
You
that's
know,
just a mindset shift of knowing
yeah,
whose you are and who
yeah,
you are. You don't, there's no
yeah,
book you can read. There's nothing you can
right.
do that can give that to you more than it's already been
Totally.
given.
Yeah, it's
That's
like
good.
I am like I definitely my nature is more of a Martha nature versus a Mary nature.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And shifting into that like just sitting with Jesus, that has like again the rest of Mary, the being able to stop the doing in order to just be with, which is really hard for some of us.
mm-hmm.
You
Especially when your
know?
name is Mary and you're like, dang it, why couldn't I
Yeah,
have been named?
I
Mary?
know, I
You
know, I
know?
know. And in that, like, one thing that I found for me in that mom period, I think because you are in a lot of ways like
Mhm.
out of control, you know, your
Mhm. Oh
life
yeah.
is shifted, your life literally is no longer just your own.
Mhm.
Um, I found myself like wanting to clean a lot and organize and like keep the kitchen. It was like my means of coping of like I can control something. And so I like
Mhm.
wouldn't nap so I could go clean the kitchen or do laundry or just like keep every
Mhm.
and you know, for me it was I had good help with my mom and all that kind of stuff. And noticed it about myself, but I think we can get into overdrive in that mode too, and really have to be like, hey, not like how clean my counters are right now don't matter. What matters is my body's rest.
Mhm.
And that can be like a really hard shift for some, for,
Mhm.
especially for those of us who are like the Martha personality.
Yes, yes, yeah, that's true. And postpartum OCD is also a thing that I've
For
done
sure.
some like reading
Uh-huh.
on. That's very common too, right?
Yes, yeah. So some of those OCD, like intrusive thoughts, are kind of a part of OCD
Mm.
as well. So again, I kind of a lot of times I'll talk with folks about, you know, again, there's the spectrum of anxiety, depression, OCD. It all meshes together. But sometimes I say like the anxiety part, which can include OCD, gets so sticky. Whereas depression can look really languid and low. And so if we
Mm.
lift that, it's like, ooh, new lease on life. Whereas anxiety, it's like deals a lot more with like fears. And
Mm.
fears, the things that we're anxious about tend to be real. Like, could something happen to your baby? It actually could.
Mhm.
So anxiety tends to be about control, and unsticking that sometimes is a little, it is more tricky because it's like it's not like the realities of an unsafe world go away. We just have to get in a space where we can live with the unknown. And that is
Yeah.
sometimes really hard. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Why do you think that's so hard for us to live with that unknown?
I think again, I think there's so much that we learn in the garden, honestly, of
Yeah.
like trust
Mm.
and the ability to, I mean, we're all to some degree grasping for control. Like we'd all
Mhm.
like to see, I mean, and that's part of survival. You know, I
Mhm.
think our brains are really good at surviving. Sometimes we're not so great at thriving. And
Mm.
trust is, I think we, in the brokenness of the world, we've lost trust in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Um, and this world is not our home. You know, we're
Mhm.
passing through. So it is unsafe in a lot of ways. So I think, yeah, letting go of control and trusting that God has a massive plan for all of it, like beyond
Yeah.
my life, beyond whatever, like all that is sad and terrible will become undone.
Mhm.
Um, that take like I can't see it right now, you know.
Right.
I just have to deeply trust in the character of
Yeah.
God, and I think that the original lie was that is he can't be trusted.
Yeah.
So like we constantly live like that's our whole journey in life is
Mhm.
undoing
Yeah.
that, you know.
Mm. The terrible lie. The terrible lie.
I
Yeah, that's
know, I
good. It
know.
makes me think of Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. It's trust in the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind,
Yeah,
all your spirit. And I think that it's no wonder that we're commanded to do it at so many levels because it
yeah,
can be one thing to have the verse memorized, but it can be an entire thing to actually live out that way from the choices you make and the habits that you do and the thoughts that you allow. And
Yeah.
I think that there's no, it doesn't, it makes complete sense that there's
Yeah.
so many layers to trust in the
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
as we move this conversation along, if one of our listeners is listening in, she's like, yeah, that kind of sounds like me, but I feel like if I brought this up to someone, they're going to say, oh, you just need to trust God, right? Like, it can be like a very blanket term, right? Like, just trust God. You're a bad, not like you're a bad Christian. I don't think Christians say that to one another these days. Maybe they did, I don't
Yeah.
know, 50 years ago, but
Yeah.
I think that, so we just need to trust the Lord. How would you respond to that? Because like trusting the Lord is
I,
good. If we have
yeah.
if we have an imbalance in either our dopamine levels, or if we have an actual chemical imbalance, how would you help someone to get to that place where they say could seek professional counsel
Hmm.
and need that
Yeah.
and not just feel like a bad Christian?
Yeah. I feel like that it's so complicated in terms of sort of our spiritual, again, the spiritual messages
Mhm.
that we pick up.
Yeah.
I sometimes take it outside of you as an individual. So, like,
Yeah.
if my child needed, was struggling with their math homework, and I readily can help them, um, yet they're too afraid to ask for my help. How grieved would my heart be that
Mhm.
they couldn't ask me for help, or they
Mhm.
couldn't, even that they couldn't ask their teacher for help. And I'm wanting to impart like help is okay.
Mhm.
I would do anything, whether they're sick, if they were struggling emotionally, whatever, like of course I would want them to access the resources, not only that I have, but the resources around us. And so
Mhm.
sometimes I think when we take it outside of ourselves of like, what if it was your child? What if it was
Mhm.
your loved one? And then we can be like, oh, duh, of course I would ask for help.
Yeah.
So I do think God has like equipped us with, um, again, that relational nature of not just trusting Him in a vacuum,
Mhm.
but what does trust look like? Is trust asking for help? Is it being vulnerable?
Mhm.
And trust, like knowing that we're already approved and loved, and therefore we can be weak before or like perceived as weak, or
Yeah.
risk that and let somebody else tend to our needs as well. So I would
Mhm.
say like to not to just be like, I'm just going to trust God more, again, goes back into that performance and striving thing.
Mhm.
I would say the yes and like
Mhm.
the yes, we're trusting God and we're going to utilize the resources and tools that He wants us, is going to bring towards us, or is made available
Mhm.
to us. So I would just say if there's guilt and shame, then we know that's not of God,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
Um, and so kind of like twisting it in that way, like, am I feeling guilt and shame about this? Okay, I'm gonna move through that and
Right.
be vulnerable. I think God meets us in that vulnerable
Mhm.
place, and we let other people meet us in that place too.
Yeah.
Trusted folks, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And how often does the enemy stop us from moving forward in the very thing that would help us to grow closer to God?
Oh, 100%. You were talking earlier about mind, soul, heart. And I would say like our lifelong journey is that trust journey, and God like kind of helping us peel that onion away. And He is so
Mhm.
gracious to us in every step. That's one thing that I feel like I'm trying to impart to my kids is like
Mhm.
it's not a destination. It's not a like checklist that you're
Yeah.
checking off every day. Like you are journeying with the Lord through this life. And some
Mhm.
seasons are going to be hard, some seasons are going to be dark, some seasons are going to be amazing. Sometimes I use the language of like wrestling, like especially with the Bible and little kids, of like some of these stories are like I have a hard time understanding these
Yes.
stories. And I tell my boys, like, this is a book that you're going to wrestle with the rest of your life
Mhm.
in a great like we see those examples like David wrestled with the Lord in the
Mhm.
Psalms and
Mhm.
all this things. So I think just like not hiding any of that from ourselves.
Yeah.
And again, going back to like putting it on our performance, like the truth is it's Him meeting us every time, like
Yeah.
using us to fight ourselves. Um, so
Yeah. That's good. That's so good. Well, I could talk about that for a very long time.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, the discipling our kids is a whole nother story that's
I
just like
know.
just so good. And then you see God's healing in your own life to be able to impart that to your
Totally.
kids. And it's so motivating. Like there's just, oh man, so much rich, deep water
And
to
as
dive in there.
moms,
But
like our desire to control shows up in our kids too. I see it with myself, and I'm like, I have to trust that God loves my kids infinitely more than I love them. And they're not on a time like my timetable. And it's one thing now when they're under my roof. Like, how much bigger are like the world's problems when they're adults?
yeah,
You know what I mean?
right,
It's like,
right.
whew, it's going to be a lifelong like handing them over to the
Yeah,
Lord. So.
yeah, yeah. We talk about 18 years and it's like, yeah, God's like, yeah, but how about their whole life?
No, I don't know that it actually gets like easier. It might get like
Yeah.
I think it probably gets emotionally harder, but
Yeah, yeah. There's been a quote that my husband and I have just like clung to throughout the last 2 years. But it's been that parenthood is designed to not simplify your life, but to sanctify it. And that's
totally.
just been like we've just come back to that. But like where life is complicated, it's much more complex these days. But we know that it's good. Like it's for our
Yeah,
good and His glory, and that's
yeah,
it gives you peace of mind to know like there's nothing wrong with the fact that it's hard. And
yeah,
I think,
yeah, for
that
sure.
same thing can go in with postpartum depression too.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Just normalizing like it's a tricky time. We don't typically have like the resources that we should have in place. You know, I
Mm,
do think that preventative work can really set us up to like just
yeah.
know what's going to happen and recognize it when things feel wonky. I think sometimes when we maybe think like, oh, I'm going to do it this way, and it maybe anxiety kicks up after a pregnancy, or just like that sense of just you're expecting the sense of overwhelming joy, and that's like not showing up,
Mm,
then I think that's when we are getting something that we didn't expect, that's sometimes when we start to struggle or spiral, and recognizing that, hey, like maybe we need some support during this
yeah.
time.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about that, like the initial phases and some of that prep work that can be done of having, people to help prepare
Yeah.
things and having family and having that more like community surrounding. What are some things if someone, if a mom is listening to this, she's like, yeah, I'm in the thick of it. What's her first step? Like I think moms can do really well. We get like really overwhelmed. They're like, do I go on to this online website and just find a random counselor? What do I do? And it can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah.
What would be like the first small baby step that would help them get towards healing?
Yeah. This is going to sound simple, and then I'm going to explain it. Sleep. Number one is sleep. And that is much harder than it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, I've recently worked with a mom who was a few months in, what baby was still exclusively breastfeeding, which is fine, obviously is fine, but she was like not getting any sleep, and it was really taking a toll. And so sometimes I'll say, okay, who can help you with the sleep thing? Can dad? Well, he doesn't know what to do. And then if I ask him, he'll just want me to do it. Okay, what about your mom or another family loved one? Well, they're busy. I don't want to ask them. Okay, so at some point, there is relinquishing control a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of that. And that is almost like the barrier with sleep sometimes, is sometimes as our mood gets dysregulated, whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever, we kind of clamp down
Yeah.
and want to be like, we just got to press through, and I can't trust anybody to do it, and they're not doing it right. And the letting go of like, hey, somebody else can take baby, obviously a trusted person can take baby if they need to, if the only, because mom ears are real. Like, my kids now, I can hear them cough from my downstairs bedroom with both of our doors closed. Like that, just our audible senses just get turned up. So if you're hearing baby squeak and make noises and that kind of stuff in another room with a caregiver,
Mm-hmm.
one, close the door, turn on a sound machine, get an eye mask, or have caregiver like take them on a drive or take them
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
But going back to like not just like that light level of like I'm laying down in my bed, but I'm mentally worried about baby the whole time.
Hmm.
Really making it to where it's the most ideal sleep situation you can get, and getting into that mode of letting go. And I would say if that anxiety will not move, if it is stuck, I do think looking at maybe what would it look like to get some help around that specifically so that your body can get into a regulated state. So all that to say, sleep is hard because it causes us to kind of have to ask for other caregivers to help.
Hmm.
Then beyond sleep, obviously eating is really important. Oftentimes, if I have a mom, I feel like having a meal train those first like that
Yeah.
first month is really common, which is
Yeah.
awesome. I remember before I had my first baby thinking like that's going to be so annoying. Like I don't want somebody coming to my house. And I was like, this is incredible.
Hmm.
You can
Hmm.
put a little cooler out in the front that they can leave it. People, I do feel like tend to know, or they can set up that little meal train thing. And it's like, just leave it. You don't have to worry about it. So it can be done in a way. Oftentimes, if it's like month 4, 5, 6 plus, whatever, and things are struggling and we need to take some responsibilities off, we'll be like, hey, just have your buddy send out the meal train again for a couple of
Hmm.
weeks. And
Yeah.
people would love to do it. That your
Yeah.
friends and family want to help. And if you don't have close friends and family, say you're new to a city, like reach out to your church
Hmm.
or a women's group. People do want to help. Sometimes people just don't know how to.
Yeah.
So going back to kind of what you did early on, um, taking those responsibilities kind of
Hmm.
off to the degree that you can. Maybe it's, for folks where sleep is just elusive, not happening, there's not a loved one. I would say night nurses are very expensive and they're incredible. So
Mm.
one hack that I would say, if you haven't had baby yet, is when you're having your baby showers. They do this a lot, I feel like, with wedding showers now, where you have like a fund in it
Yeah.
for the honeymoon. I would
Yeah.
say like a babysitting or night nurse fund, just to have it there where you have like maybe a
Mm.
couple $100s available, where it's like things have gone awry. We need 1 or 2 nights of uninterrupted sleep with a
Yeah.
professional
Yeah.
there. Um, so I think there's options. And if you're just lost and don't know, I feel like one really great resource, which I'm sure you're familiar with, is Postpartum Support International.
Mm.
At the postpartum.net is the website.
Hmm.
And if you're just like, who in my area works with postpartum women or
Hmm.
perinatal women, you can find a provider on there quickly and you could just do a consult with them. If your brain is just so much machine, like I don't even know where to start. So,
Yeah.
um, the sleeping, eating, asking for help for the sort of basic
It's good.
building blocks first.
Yeah. That's really good. When should somebody know, not should, what would be the red flag of like, okay, it's time. I need some big guns. Let me go get help.
Yeah, yeah. Let me speak to the biggest red flags because that does happen. And it's important, I think, for people who are caregivers with the primary caregiver just to know, like big red flags, obviously thoughts of harm. If
Hmm.
a woman is starting to say, I just obviously like I wish I would die, or I
Mm.
wish tomorrow wouldn't come. We all say like, oh, I don't want to wake up in the morning, but I wish tomorrow would never come.
Mm.
Or if they're starting to, postpartum psychosis is a very real thing, and
Mm.
prolonged untreated postpartum depression or mood changes, and especially for people who've maybe had some mood episodes prior to having a baby, risk is
Mm.
higher. So
Hmm.
if mom is starting to say things that are really unusual,
Mm.
like beyond our typical, like, I think this baby is going to be an amazing person, or like just things that feel off, like
Mm.
that they may be at risk. And that's when I say, like, hey, that would be a good time to, you know, like you can call 911 if you don't know. You can
Mm.
take somebody to the hospital and just say, something's not right
Mm.
here. She's starting to say things that I don't recognize.
Mm.
So being on the lookout for that and not just being like, oh, this is something weird tonight, but just really being attuned. If mom, to bring it down a level, if mom is starting to be fearful of being with her baby because she's afraid she would harm it, that tells me that
Mhm.
anxiety is maybe those intrusive thoughts have gotten loud and she doesn't know what to do. Not that I think
Yeah.
she would harm baby, but clearly she's being affected by that level of
Mhm.
anxiety. If mom is, again, take like kind of getting less severe, but if mom is not able to get out of bed or ever take a shower, ever eat, especially eating, because I think when we get low, like sometimes appetite increases and sometimes appetite just goes away. But
Mhm.
if mom's not able to do the basics, then
Mhm.
caregiver might say like, hey, let's consult with somebody and just make sure there's not, we could maybe get some support around this. So I think having caregivers attuned to like what is typical, what are we getting support for, and what is concerning a
Yeah,
little bit,
that's good.
Um, and I think with mom, if noticing like like again, going back to like if every day it feels like I'm just crushed. Like we have days where we're overwhelmed, but if you're living in that kind of constant overwhelmed, irritable,
Mhm.
unhappy state that seems unrelenting, even when you do get sleep or you do
Mhm.
get some help,
Yeah.
I would expect with again going back to that within normal limits. Like if mom can have a day where she can get good naps, maybe she has some support around the house, has some of the responsibilities, baby offloaded to a trusted caregiver, then I would expect that to be restorative. And maybe maybe she should notice, like, hey, that was really helpful. I need to
Mhm.
do that again or do that
Mhm.
consistently. Okay, great. We're moving in the right direction.
Mhm.
If we're doing those things and we're remaining low and we're not getting any signs of restoration,
Mhm.
or moving in the right direction, then hey, like, yeah, let's enlist some, let's get a consult and just like talk about what it would look like to, get some help. And a good provider can always say, like, hey, I think just talking through like a logistical plan, like I do that a lot with my postpartum moms. Like, okay, you need to get a meal train. Who's going to watch your baby while you sleep? This is what you have
Mhm.
to do. That's my prescription, is sleep
Yeah.
and
Right.
meals.
Right.
And then, so I don't expect providers just to be like, here, I'm just going to throw a medication at you and not
Mhm.
like talk about it. Sometimes
Yeah.
that's appropriate. And sometimes we just need to do the other logistical things.
Yeah.
Um, so it's never wrong to like kind of ask for.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, to kind of
Yeah.
go through, like, thread out the easy
Yeah.
pulls, and
Yeah.
then
You're
once
not,
those.
yeah. And this goes for any, like it should be any medical specialty in my opinion. You're never gonna have somebody like say, oh, why did you come? Like you're not that bad. Get out of here. This is dumb. You know?
Yes. Yeah.
So like that's what I remember, as a young person fearing that. And then almost every time I finally went to like the dermatologist or a specialist or something, I was like, man, I should have done that like 2 years ago.
Yes.
I didn't think
Yes.
it was bad enough, so to speak. And there's really not a bad enough. It's like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be um, chastised for, you know, looking for an opinion.
Yeah. That's good. That's so good. Well, Mary, as we wrap up the
Yeah,
conversation, if somebody wants to get in contact with you, maybe look into Lucira Health, what are some ways they can reach out to you?
totally. My website has a lot of information, both in the perinatal period and for women and otherwise. So it's Lucera, Lucera health.co. .co. They can look at me on Instagram. I have Lucera at Lucera Health or at my page at Mary Reames R. So those are great ways. And I see folks all in Tennessee and South Carolina. I always tell people though, if they're not in those two states and they just don't know where to go, like shoot me a message and I definitely can connect you. I feel like in the perinatal world, we have like such a rich resource base and we
Mhm.
can get you connected with somebody. I never hesitate to, you know, um, connect somebody with a like-minded provider in their area.
That's so good. That's so good. Awesome. Well, Mary, thank you so much for your time and just all of your wonderful insights. It's so helpful. Thank you also for wading through some deep waters, talking about
Oh
some tough
yeah.
things, because it's, I think that there's so much nuance when you start to bring in your spiritual beliefs to like mental health, but they do inform that, right? Like the gospel
Yeah.
goes A to Z, right? It's not just like A,
Yeah.
B, C.
Yeah.
It's all of them. So I think that it's helpful to have a professional perspective. And guys, if you enjoyed the show, go ahead and give Mary a follow on Instagram. Check out her website. If you are in the thick of it, just reach out to her. Either check out her as a provider if you're in those states, or reach out to her and ask for a provider that she's comfortable, sharing with you, and you can get a trusted resource from a trusted friend. So awesome. All right. Well, Mary, thanks so much for being on the show. Guys, until next time, stay strong. All the love, Coach Laura. Awesome.
Thanks so much.